Hey, everybody, welcome to the HR and Leadership Podcast Show. I'm Chuck, I'm your host. I'm excited to bring a guest today that is someone you have met before. And you may be looking on the screen saying, I don't know her. Well, you have. You have met her before because she is someone, maybe you don't know her yet. You don't know her name, but you know what she does. She is a professional employment recruiter. Absolutely. So if you've ever applied for a job, ever sent a resume in, ever sent an application in, and you wondered, did anyone ever take a look at it? My guest today, Chris Moon, is one of the folks that would have probably seen your resume. And she is here to talk about tips, tricks, give some insight. She's going to share her story today. This is very exciting to have a professional employment recruiter on the show. Chris, how you doing out there today?
Good. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, as I do with all guests, I talk about the mugs. I love the mugs. Our logo, as you can see, is the coffee mug. Oh, yeah, with the pod microphone in it. Talk about your mug, Chris.
Well, this is my Walt Disney Imagineering coffee mug that has Sorcerer Mickey on it. So it's really special because it reminds me of the time that I worked at Walt Disney Imagineering as the professional staffing manager on some great projects. So we'll talk about those. But yeah, it's my Sorcerer Mickey mug.
I love that. I love that. Chris, and I'm just going to do and I know I'm not going to do huge justice to this, but you've got over 20 years of HR experience, primarily in recruiting, although you've done other things. I know you've done training and some employee relations and such. You've worked for Fortune 500 companies, and I'm just going to try and list them off based on what you and I have talked about. So you've worked for Walt Disney Imagineering. You've worked for, which I want you to talk to the audience in a couple minutes about what exactly Imagineering does and your
Hmm.
role, the types of positions you hired. You've worked for Universal Studios here in Orlando, Universal Orlando. You've worked in the finance sector, right? You've worked for SunTrust Bank,
Right.
which they've changed their name now. It's called Truist, I think. You've worked for the Orlando Sentinel. You've worked for Central Florida News Channel 13, a TV station. You've worked in resorts. You've worked for Longboat Key Club. And this is kind of a cool one. You've worked for Ringling. Because I know
Right.
you're coming to us from Sarasota, Florida, but
Right.
you've worked for Ringling College of Art and Design, which to me is, and I know people are thinking, well, she's done Disney, Universal. I know, but really the Ringling thing is kind of cool. You don't meet too many folks that work for
Right. Right.
Ringling. So did I catch everything?
Yeah, pretty much. I've worked in a lot of different areas, hospitality and entertainment and resorts, banking, education. So I have a pretty well-rounded level of expertise in all areas of recruitment and human resources in those industries, which has been fun and exciting to see the different types of businesses and how they operate and the type of talent that they are looking for. So it's been really fun, great journey so far.
Cool. So talk to us about your journey. Talk to us about how someone becomes a professional employment recruiter.
Right. Well, I stumbled into this career as a result of a bad experience that I had myself with an interview. When I was first out of college, I had a job interview with a human resources manager. Didn't go as well as I thought it should have, mainly because the interviewer was more of an interrogator than an
Okay.
interviewer. And I just left feeling that I didn't put my best foot forward. I felt really uncomfortable during the interview. It really shot my confidence down to a low level. But when I came out, I thought to myself, I think I could do a better job at this, at communicating, at connecting with people, and bringing the best out of someone during an interview. And that's when I decided to go into human resources. So that's where my journey began as far as choosing this as a career. And I'm sure everybody out there can relate to this, having a bad interview experience. And sometimes it's not due to anything that you've done, but it may be you just have the unfortunate luck of having a bad interviewer. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that as well, and how you can avoid that. But so that's how I decided to go into this career. And there were a lot of different things that I did along the way. I pursued my degree in human resources management. I have my certification from SHRM, and I'm always looking at new ways to increase my knowledge and skill sets through education and certifications, keeping up with employment laws and all of the various human resources laws as well. So that's important along the way, education, training, recertifying your skills. And one of the first most exciting opportunities I had in human resources was with you, of course, when we were both fortunate enough to be part of the grand opening team at Universal Studios Florida, and were responsible for recruiting the first 3,000 or so employees to open the studio. And that was a great experience regarding mass hiring, job fairs, hiring all different types of employees, everything from non-exempt operational folks and merchandise, food services, up through technical services individuals, creative designers, architects, project managers, finance, marketing, you name it. We were exposed to all different types of roles, because in a theme park, you traditionally think of people that are operating the rides as the
Right.
majority of the employees that are there, but there's a lot of other people that make the machine run behind the scenes. So I was able to be part of hiring that first grand opening team along with you, and we had a great time. It was
Oh,
hard work, but it
it
was a
was the Wild
fantastic
West. We
experience.
really we were making things up as we went along back then. It was fun. We had a good
Right.
time.
And it hadn't been done at that scale for
Right.
quite a while in the Orlando area. We had a lot of things to work out. We did it. And now Universal's going through that almost again, all over again, with several
Right.
new theme park projects that are popping up around the country. And of course, Epic Universe, which is going to be opening here in the next few years. I just recently came off of a 4-year assignment working with Universal. Unfortunately, I was impacted by the COVID-19 situation, and all of our hiring had come to a halt. So I'm in the same boat as a lot of other people out there right now. As a recruiter myself, I'm now on the other side of the table looking for new opportunities, but was fortunate and was able to do a lot of hiring for these new projects that Universal is about to launch, and worked with Universal Creative in particular, which is the design and development group for Universal Orlando Parks and Resorts.
Okay. So I gotta think back, and I remember when we were hiring, we had to hire, probably for the audience sake, this is kind of neat trivia. We had to hire, I think, 3 or 4 thousand employees to get a whole theme park up and running. And folks, I got to tell you, this was, if I remember sitting at my desk, I didn't have a computer. I didn't have any type of, right. We didn't have any of that stuff. What we did, we had a phone, and I remember that was one of the first jobs I ever had, where I had my own phone with my own voicemail. And and so we did it, right? We did it.
It
And
was incredible.
we'd meet every morning. We'd have a spreadsheet of what open jobs there were, and all the advertising was done via um, the newspaper,
Right,
via word
newspaper.
of,
There was no internet really. We didn't post jobs on Indeed or Monster, and we had paper resumes stacked up every morning on our desks. Paper resumes, which you don't see anymore, and applications, and hundreds of people in line in the lobby, going out the door, waiting to be interviewed. It was pretty insane, but
it was.
it was great experience. I
It
wouldn't trade it
was.
for the world. It was really
It,
great.
it really was. So let's talk about that, because you talk about how, let's talk about how HR recruiting has changed. And I know you've reviewed thousands of resumes over the years in your career, and you have a great insight into what top employers are looking for and how their selection process works. Now, back then, if I could just jump in, it was it was all paper, and I can remember going home at night, taking a stack of resumes, and just
Right.
spending the whole night either drinking a cup of coffee or maybe an adult beverage or something. And crazy story, right? Crazy story from the recruiters. And we'd sit there all night and we would just look at paper resumes, one after another, white paper, black ink, white paper, black ink. And every once in a while, someone would do something crazy like send a giant Hershey bar or
Right. Yeah.
something along. Remember those days?
The creative folks, right? Folks that were looking for positions in marketing or in design would send all kinds of interesting, three-dimensional objects or balloons with their resume attached to the balloon would come floating into the office, and ways to stand out in a very competitive market, because at that time everybody was trying to get their foot in the door at Universal. A lot of people that were looking to make career changes. I remember interviewing airline pilots
Mm-hmm.
who thought it would be fun to work at Universal.
Right.
And how does someone like that make a career change when they're doing something completely different than what we're looking for? But people were very creative. And now you have to still be creative in
Right.
this market. We have different tools, of course, that you can be creative with, and applicants can do a lot of different things to make their application and resume stand out. And so it's not that different than what we saw then. The only difference is we have computer tools now versus hard tools, and no balloons floating in the office.
Right.
But
Well, you could, but let's talk about then as a professional recruiter. You have a lot of knowledge of what top employers are looking for. So let's just, for the fun of it, what advice do you have for job seekers in this environment? Right? It's
right.
no balloons, no Hershey bars.
Yeah.
Maybe you could, I guess, but now it's resumes and applications are everything's electronic now. So talk about that.
Right, right. Well, as a recruiter, I do review thousands of resumes. And I think there's a few misconceptions that applicants have out there that I'd like to kind of share some insights with. One
Cool.
is that a lot of applicants assume that there is no human reviewing their resume, that they send it in, apply for a job online, and it just goes into a black hole somewhere, and that it's a automated artificial intelligence computer system that spits out yeses and nos. While some parts of the resume application process are automated, it's usually the responses that are automated rather than custom, responses to people. The actual resume review is still done by a live person. So when somebody applies for a job, just know that we are reviewing your resume. We are reviewing it very carefully. But the thing to keep in mind is that because we are looking at hundreds of resumes, the attention span and the time that we have to dedicate to reviewing that resume is very short. So you have to make an impact right away with your resume.
Right.
And so one of my tips is to make your resume clean and concise looking. And it doesn't always have to be one page. A lot of people say, oh, I have to keep my resume to one page or else it's going to be rejected by the computer bot. That's not necessarily the case. If you have really strong relevant experience, a two-page resume is fine. The key is to make sure that the information on your resume is relevant, it's specific, and it's concise. So that would be my one suggestion, is to really look at your resume objectively and avoid vague terms like I managed a team. And for what type of team did you manage, and how large was the team, and what were you managing, what type of project, what was the budget, what was the outcome? If you can include some specifics like that rather than just saying led teams or managed processes, you have to outline a little bit of information specifically on what that team consisted of, what the process was, how you saved the company money, things of that sort. So that's important. And also, we don't necessarily need a lot of information about why you're a great candidate and why we should hire you. And that statement that people usually put at the top of their resume, it's usually some sort of a statement as to how great you are. I would rather see the information on your employment history in a concise way than a statement about how good
Interesting.
you are and what you have to offer.
So you're
I just
talking
feel
about
that,
people put on the top, you
right.
know, certified professional HR director, multitasking, critical thinker. People put all those things up at the top. You're saying you don't really read those, right? You go right to,
If you're going to put that, it's not a bad thing, but you should keep it short, maybe 2 lines. Some
okay.
people do a whole paragraph summary of all of their information. You can have a separate section, especially if have experience, a separate section at the bottom of your resume that lists your certifications, your education, and so forth. If
Mm-hmm.
you're a new candidate, then you would put that information at the top. If you're a new graduate or you have just a year or two of experience, then you should list that at the top. But if you're an experienced person, certifications, education should go at the bottom. But also, a lot of people leave things out like dates of employment, which is important to see sort of the time you've spent in the position, if you were promoted, what the progression of your experience was to show that you were progressively taking on more and more
Right.
experience and responsibility. That's important to show. So, an updated resume is really crucial. And a lot of times people wait until they're out of work to update their resume. And if you haven't changed jobs for 10 years, then it may be difficult to go back and think about all the accomplishments you had in that 10 years. And you're going to want to, at least once a year, get in the habit of updating your resume. List the accomplishments you had that year, and you can always revise it or cut it back if you need to. But just sort of a running draft of your resume, you should do every year when you have your performance review, for example. You should
Mm-hmm.
update your resume with any awards, new certifications, and so on. So you don't have to go back and try to recreate 10 years of experience, all of a sudden when it's time to look for a job. So keeping your resume updated is really important.
Okay. So I love this. These are like secrets of the recruiter, you
Right.
know?
We have short attention spans
Okay.
and
That's a
we have
great secret. Tell
hundreds
them
of
about
resumes. Right. So you have to make an impact. And if your resume it has to just get right to the point right away. And just know that a human is reviewing your resume. So it's not always about, the keywords and putting in fancy language. You really have to get specific and know that we are looking at your resume, we are reading it. It's not a robot, and so it's not always about those keyword searches that you hear a lot about. A
it. Hmm.
lot of the time, it needs to be real content that's meaty, that's meaningful, and not just a bunch of buzzwords.
Sure.
You have to have
I,
stuff to back it up with.
right, right. I think about when I scan resumes in my career, I know the first thing I look for is what they did, what their job title was, and where they worked, what type of just to get. And once I scan through that, then I go back and I will read about what their bullet points and their accomplishments. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. Like they get these resumes, and I do that quick scan, and a lot of times that quick scan, I put it to the no pile because it has nothing to do with the job
Right.
and I think to myself, did you read the job description?
Right.
And I'm
Right.
sorry, job seekers, but that's, you want a conversation between two recruiters, right? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm like,
Right.
did they even read the job description? It has nothing to do with their background.
Yeah. And that would be my next tip as a recruiter is to be sure that you are applying for positions that you are qualified for and you meet the minimum requirements for the job posting or job description. A lot of times people will just use a shotgun approach and they feel that the more resumes they send out, the more applications that they submit, the greater their chances are of getting a job. But it's not like the lottery. It's not as though the more resumes and applications you send out there, the chances of you winning your dream job are going to increase.
Mhm.
And it does take away the time and attention from real, truly qualified applicants when people do that. And it is a mistake. It's just, it just doesn't make any sense. So you should only apply for positions that you meet the minimum qualifications for. Now, a lot of times people are looking to change industry. They want to take part in a career change. And that's fine as long as your skills are transferable. And that's where you need to perhaps do a cover letter that explains how your
Right.
skills are transferable. Maybe you're going from the entertainment industry into healthcare. And how are you going to demonstrate what you did in entertainment might transfer over into healthcare? So you have to look at the job description, analyze it, and really think about how can I convince this employer that even though I've got 10 years of experience in entertainment, I would still make a good candidate for your position in healthcare, whether it's customer services or management or finance or IT. All of those areas you can work in different
Mhm.
industries. Those are transferable areas that you can work in. So that's very important, is to be sure that you're applying for positions you're qualified for and not use a shotgun approach.
All right. Any other secrets you can think of for the im- for the job seekers, and also, and I know you've been talking about resumes and stuff, but what about actually showing up for the interview? Do you got any tips for that when they finally show up, or maybe even before that, the first
Right.
phone call, right? The
Sure,
first
sure.
interviews, things like that. What do you have to say about that?
Well, first, to answer your first question, one of the most important tips in your job search, especially right now for those that have been affected by COVID-19, is that you have to remember that you have a network that you can reach out to.
Oh, right.
The
Good
most
one.
important thing you can do right now in this crazy time with all this uncertainty is to network. Reach out to everyone you know, everyone in every industry, every friend, every colleague, every coworker, former bosses, everyone that you know in your network, and let them know that you're searching for a new opportunity. And there's a lot of great resources out there. If you're not already on LinkedIn, you should get on LinkedIn and establish a profile. You should be participating and joining different associations that are part of your profession. So for me, I am part of the SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management Association, as well as my local SHRM chapter. And reaching out and networking is the most important thing you can do right now. Of course, you need to have your resume updated, but the network is how you're going to eventually, most likely, get your next position. Because another secret is that I don't know the exact percentage, every organization is different, but most organizations hire through referrals. That's their number one source of hiring,
Right.
is through referrals, not through job postings or career fairs necessarily. It's through referrals from other employees. So you want to take advantage of that and use your network and reach out to people and start letting them know that you're available, that you're flexible, and do whatever you can to get the word out. And of course, as I said, join organizations. This is also a great time because I know if you're like me, I was so busy when I was hiring the 600 or so people for projects at Universal that I didn't have time to work on my own professional development and learning. So this is the time while you're conducting your job search to go out and take some additional training classes, update your skills, certifications, whatever it might be. So these are things that you can add to your resume and enhance your skill sets that you offer to employers. So that's very important to take this time to work on you, on your professional development,
Yeah.
your emotional development. Take a little time off and enjoy the fact that you're not working. In some ways it can be nice. We can, focus on ourselves and rejuvenate. So you can't look at it always as a bad thing, but take the time to really work on your professional development. That's another point. So networking is huge, and just know that it does work. So don't be shy about it either. Let other people do the work for you. Ask
Hmm.
friends and colleagues to send your resume out to people they know if you're nervous about doing it. But don't be shy. This is the time to do that. And then your other question was about preparing for the interview. One thing I wanted to touch on that I'm kind of excited about, and I'm going to be offering coming up to applicants through a free webinar that I'm developing because I do want to help and reach out to those individuals that are in the same boat that I am now as a recruiter, but
Hmm.
to share my experience and expertise is a way for us to stand out. We're all in this together. I am in it with you now as a recruiter who is now unemployed. And that is something that I've researched and think might be a really good tool. And it's a video resume. And it's something that you can do and I can assist with is basically to present yourself in the form of a video that you can post on your LinkedIn profile, that you can send to employers along with your resume. And it's basically like a 30-second infomercial about yourself, pitching your skills and experience in a very quick, concise, professional way that might get the attention of employers more so than just a paper resume may do.
Right.
So that's something I'm going to be working on and offering to people, coaching them through creating a video resume or just a video introduction of yourself and as a way to stand out. And that will also be something that can help you prepare for your interview because everything is virtual now. It's very
Hmm.
unlikely that you're going to be able to go in person to meet with a human resources manager or recruiter or hiring manager because of the pandemic. So we all have to start getting comfortable with talking to a computer like I'm talking to you right now, Chuck,
Right,
is something that
exactly.
I'm not used to. I feel really confident when I talk with candidates in person because there's that exchange that goes on and you can look at someone in the eye and so on. And now I'm looking at the computer really.
Right,
And I have to practice this a little bit, and I
right.
think everyone needs to start to practice conversing, talking, presenting themselves through this medium now, which is virtual or the electronic medium. So one of the things that I'd like to offer and put out there is to help people get their video interview presentation perfected and practice it. And there's a lot of different tools available now where you
Mhm.
can do that. Resume interviews or video interviews and different types of tools that will allow you to practice your interview with sample questions that I could provide and customize to
I
your
love
specific
that.
situation. And I know
Right.
I sent one to you not too long
Right,
ago,
right. I
Chuck.
had fun with it as a
Right.
sample.
Yeah.
So that sounds great. Chris, it's funny you mentioned that, and we're getting down to our time, but so this is me looking at you as I talk, right? I'm looking at the camera, or not at the camera, I'm looking at the screen, and I think I'm talking to you. But in all reality, if I'm talking to you, I should be looking right here at my camera. And if I'm interviewing, if I'm doing a video interview, I need to be talking to the camera there. I
Right.
need to keep an eye on my background. What am I wearing? How do I look? So yeah, it is some Chris. There's so much to talk about. We have so can I at some point in time? I'd love to have you back on the show. I'd love to have you back on the show. I'd love to talk more about some of the things you touched on. But I think it might be fun to say, okay, if you're an employer, what are the things you can do to up your game? Like you said, you went for an interview, you got an interrogation, and
Right.
and as you know, there's a lot of employers out there that probably could use help because I will say this: the way that an interview goes and the way an interviewer, a recruiter like yourself, portrays himself makes me think, well, how is that company, the culture of the company, like, and so I think there are a lot of employers that could benefit from your experience also. I think you could play both sides here, and I love
Oh,
it.
right,
I
right,
love it.
absolutely. As a recruiter, I do work with both sides. I work with applicants every day and try to bring out the best in them when I ask questions and interview them and have them present to me their qualifications. And some people are more comfortable doing it than others, so I may have to do follow-up questions or rephrase the question to make the applicant have a better understanding of what it is I'm trying to get from them. And the same thing is true for our hiring managers. A lot of hiring managers are great at managing their teams, projects, and so on, but they're not totally comfortable or confident when it comes to interview and selection.
Hmm.
And they don't always get the training they need in order to do that properly and get the right information from the candidate. I use a lot of different techniques. I do some training for new managers who have the responsibility of hiring. It's something new. And we use a lot of training tools such as behavioral interviewing,
Hmm.
mock interviews, things of that sort that would prepare a new manager for what they need to know in order to make the right hiring decisions. Because if you don't ask the right questions and put the candidate at ease, you're going to make the wrong hiring decision. So that is something also that I'll be offering a webinar on, is some tools and tips for hiring managers, whether you're a new hiring manager or new to being a manager and have responsibility for hiring, or an existing manager who maybe hasn't hired in a while. And
Yeah.
now's the time, again, while we're at a slowdown with hiring, to hone up on your skills and learn some techniques and tricks, very simple things that you can do to ensure that you are getting the best out of that candidate. And that's so important because so many managers will just ask a question that's so open-ended, the candidate doesn't really know where to go with it. My favorite is, tell me about yourself. And that's great. It's a great open-ended question, but it's almost so broad that the candidate's not really sure what you're asking. And some candidates will take that to mean, well, when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader, and then I became, this in college, and I
Right.
decided to study this, and I do volunteer work, and they go on, and you don't really, by the time you're done with that question, you don't get to the real meat of what you're trying to find out, is whether they're qualified for your specific position.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that hiring managers can do differently, and your interview is only going to be as good as the questions you ask. If you don't ask good questions, the applicant is not going to have the opportunity to present and put forth their best effort. And so that's important, that hiring managers ask the right questions. So that's something that
This is
we can
all, yeah.
work on.
No, this is all fantastic stuff. I'm going to have you back on the show, and I cannot wait to see these webinars and get the word out. So why don't you tell us, Chris, how could people get in touch with you right now? And folks, whatever Chris says, I'm going to put them in the show notes down there below. Okay. Yep. But Chris, you tell us, how could people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Chris Moon Recruiter. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can also email me at the number two, moon at gmail.com, chris2moon at gmail.com, and or through Chuck. So there's a couple of different ways to reach me. And again, I will be putting together some information and sharing some tips and tricks on interviewing, on resume writing, for applicants. And I'd love to connect with anybody that, especially if you're in the entertainment industry, hospitality, we've all been really hard hit by the pandemic. So I'd really like to reach out and help those individuals in some way. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out. And I'll also be providing some tips for hiring managers so that when the hiring does ramp up again, which we know it will, you'll be ready and prepared to
Right.
hire the best possible
Right.
candidates.
I think, folks, did you hear that? Go to Chris Moon Recruiter, find her on LinkedIn, uh, at least follow her, look for her updates. Chris, I want to thank you for coming. I love having a professional recruiter on. I mean, I've done recruiting, I've done employee relations, done all that, but I got to tell you, someone that just dives into recruiting like you, sees it every day, lives it and breathes it. It's fantastic having you on the show. And folks, I got to tell you, if you are an HR person, you're a consultant, you're a entrepreneur, you have your own business, maybe you're a leader, you want to get the message out about what you do, who you are, what you're all about, I would love to have you on this show, the HR and Leadership Spotlight Show. There's my neat mug that I have. Very excited about that. And just contact me. I have my information down below. We'll get you on the show. Let's talk. I would love to interview you. Chris, thanks a lot. Folks, until next time, be safe out there. And it was great to have you watch the HR Leadership Podcast. Well, we also do a podcast. We put this out on a podcast in addition to the video. We try and cover all the bases. All right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, Chuck.
All right.